Welcome back to the channel. I'm Jiangxi, aka Year of the Collector, and this is the fourth installment of the new history of the DC Universe by Mark Waid and Dave Wilgoss. In the previous episode, we covered the third page of Citations from issue 1. We covered the fall of Etrigan the Demon by the hands of his own brother Merlin the Sorcerer, the rise of more offshoot descendants of the Homo Magi like the daughters of the Elder Folk, the internal power struggles that saw the ascension of Oxus to power and then to becoming Darkseid, the rise of Earth's Manhunters, Brother Blood, Athlorat, Gorilla City, and many others. Before we begin, let me drop the disclaimer. During the research for this episode, I encountered plenty of questionable moments and characters. A lot of the citations and the book references to line out the history of the universe draw directly from the published comics from the 1930s, 40s, 50s, and so on and so forth. There are a lot of problematic, racist, misogynist, and xenophobic tones and takes from plenty of the creators of this era. I did my best to avoid said issues on this video, but I wanted to put the disclaimer out there because if you follow the citations and go read these comics for yourself, you will find all these horrible things in them, and I don't want you to walk in and get blindsided. This is an unfortunate part of the publishing history of DC and our country in general. You will recognize some characters, moments, or stories mentioned here that may be retconned to fit into the timeline or even the universe's history according to the way Mark Waid sees it. I saw a lot of citations contradicting each other myself, or I had to pick and choose which comics I wanted to use for the video that showcase the history better or in a much more clear way. So don't come at me in the comments. I'm not in agreement or disagreement with Mark Waid. I'm just presenting you with the citations laid out by the new history of the DC Universe comic book. Lastly, stick around all the way to the end for the citations if you like to read any of the comics referenced in this video. With that being said, let's begin with part 4 of the new history of the DC Universe. Chapter 58: The Origins of the Gay Ghost. In the year 1700, Keith Everett, the Earl of Strathmere, rode into town and came upon thugs, who killed him with a gunshot. His lover, Deborah Wallace, came upon him moments before he died. But after he passed, he became a ghost and was unnoticeable by his lover. 80 years later, Deborah was long dead, and his ancestors appeared in front of him and granted him the chance to return to Earth in exchange for bringing justice. Chapter 59: The Green Martian Who Lost Everything. Ma'alefak, brother of John Johns, unleashes a telepathic flame plague called the Atramir's Curse. The Martian weakness to fire was both physical and psychological. Their thoughts came on fire at the expense of all else. Their very own bodies erupted into flames. It took all he had to block the sounds of the screams and howls, the stench of burning flesh, the feel of ash coating his skin, the thoughts of the doom eating away at his mind like waves of sand. The plague destroys the ancient race and civilization of Mars, including John's family. When he woke up, he was alone. All of Mars had been burned to the ground. Devastated, John wanders aimlessly until he is unexpectedly pulled to Earth through space and time. Chapter 60: Ferro, the Carib Pirate. Ferro was a young member of the Carib tribe from what it is now known as Haiti. The tribe was fishing on the Artibonite River in Haiti, led by their leader, Quinto. During the fishing expedition, they encountered a Spanish ship. The Spanish sought to capture the Caribs, who fought back valiantly. Ferro's father is killed, but he gives a last admonition to his son. Quinto named Ferro the new leader of the Caribs with the duty to never let his people be enslaved. The remaining tribesmen swim to land, where they are captured by the Spanish. They are taken to a mine and subjugated into forced labor. Under Ferro's leadership, they revolt, killing the sleeping Spaniards and stealing their ships. Unfortunately, during their escape, they were struck by a storm and sent adrift. Ferro was rescued from drifting in the open sea by a crew of pirates. After challenging their captain, Ferro took command of the ship, and the men swore to follow him as per their pirate code and customs. From that moment on, Ferro was known as Captain Fear. Chapter 61: The American Revolution. When America was still young, the beat of war drums echoed warnings through fields and forests all the same. Native men and nature turned fierce and hostile on the colonizers. In the heat of that struggle, two frontiersmen forged a firm bond. These two men were Tomahawk and Dan Hunter. Bess Lynn worked as a nurse during the early years of the American Revolution. Inspired by her fellow compatriots and a sense of honor, she began wearing a mask and wig and adorned herself in the colors of the American flag. Calling herself Miss Liberty, she heroically fought against European invaders, often alongside the frontiersman Tomahawk and his young compatriot Dan Hunter. Not too long after, soldiers came together from Virginia, Connecticut, Maine, New York, from all points of the compass, out of cities and country hamlets, leaving their shops and plowshares at the first rumbles of war. Each man trained to become better men, and soon they were the best battle-tested veterans. They were known as the Rangers, an extraordinary band of soldiers who fought for American independence under the command of their leader Tomahawk during the American Revolutionary War. The original members of this unit were Big Anvil, Cannonball, Dan Hunter, Frenchie, Cane Tuck Jones, Long Rifle, and their leader Thomas Hawkins. During this time, women also joined the fighting efforts against the British Army. Even if the Rangers didn't approve at first, the Fighting Angels, as they were called, proved themselves more than capable in battle. In a plot twist of the time traveler kind, Dan Hunter turned out to be a member of the Time Masters, a team of time-traveling adventurers led by Rip Hunter. Their mission is to explore time and solve problems affecting the time stream. Dan Hunter travels back in time to stop a conspiracy to assassinate George Washington, which would have altered the result of the American Revolutionary War. Everything ends, including wars. Tomahawk did get to live a long life after the war. He ended up settling down and marrying a Native American called Moon Fawn. Together, they had a son called Hawk. One day, he will grow up to become a pacifist known as Hawk, son of Tomahawk. Unlike his celebrated father, Hawk was contemptuous of violence, particularly as it related to racial relationships and brutality between Native American tribes and white men. Probably because of having Native American family, Hawk had a different perspective from most other people of that time. Firehair was born sometime in the early 1800s. He was the lone survivor of a wagon train massacre by the Blackfoot Indians. The infant boy was adopted and raised by the Blackfoot chief Gray Cloud. By the age of 18, Firehair was more skilled than any of his peers in the tribe and left to discover his true heritage. He became a protector of those on the plains and, sadly, was despised by both the whites and the natives. Max Mercury was born in the early 19th century. By 1838, he had been assigned as a messenger at a fort. He made friends with the local Blackfoot clan. Unfortunately, his fort commander, who did not trust any of them, leveled a bounty on the clan and ordered a full-scale massacre. The shaman of the clan, with his dying breath, told Max that many tribesmen were returning from the hunt and that they would be ambushed if not warned quickly. With a pinkish substance, the shaman drew a lightning bolt on Max's chest, gave a prayer to the god of the storm and the wind, and died. Max ran faster and faster and faster still, as swift as the wind. He took the soldiers' weapons and caught the Blackfoot arrows mid-air. He devoted the next few years of his life to protecting the natives and the settlers from one another like Iwata, or as he was better known, Wind Runner. However, one night during a thunderstorm, Max felt drawn to the lightning from deep within his heart. He ran as he had never run before, breaking all barriers, and he began to be drawn into the Speed Force, the energy field that gives speedsters their power. Meanwhile, in the southern region of what was later known as California, a swashbuckler left his mark during the later days of the Spanish Empire. Don Caballero moved to Southern California from his native Spain in the early years of the 19th century and established an estate in the small community of Hawk Hill. Don Caballero used his fencing skills to thwart local felons and even supernatural threats, becoming Hawk Hill's greatest hero in the process. Just around 1775, the Daily Planet was founded by Joshua Merriweather as a weekly periodical news outlet. Back then, the offices were at the south of the New Troy, which later became the main island of Metropolis. Later, they were burned down by the British during the Revolutionary War in the Great Fire of 1783. The paper was refounded 10 years later, and it's been published on a more or less continual basis ever since. It is said that George Washington himself wrote the first editorial for the Daily Planet and other historical articles like his presidential farewell address. Chapter 62: A Rivalry of Shadows. The next series of events are based on the writings of Simon Culp and Richard Swift, circa London 1837. Simon Culp was a common criminal, petty theft, and that sort of mischief from starving people. Richard Swift, aka Dicky, lived better off in comparison, but their lives would take turns for the wicked when they learned they had access to manipulate shadows. Dicky's powers manifested when he was cornered and his life was threatened. The shadows summoned by Dicky not only protected him from his assailants, but consumed them altogether. Dicky had no idea of what took place at that moment or why, but he was not fazed either. Rather, his memory was clouded, feeling dazed and lost for a moment. One could say, vulnerable. Simon Culp witnessed Richard's vulnerable moment and saw an opening on an easy mark. But a carriage saved the unsuspecting Swift from being robbed, stabbed, and killed by the starving Simon. Simon kept going, dragging his starving self through the alleys of London town until he discovered his abilities in one scream of hunger and desperation when he, enraged, desired what others had. His powers manifested from a crippling hatred of necessity. For the years to come, these two were destined to combat each other all over the world. In 1860, they wreaked havoc in India when they faced each other trying to cash in on a bounty offered by the Sultan whose daughter had been kidnapped by the Tiger cult. Safe to say, many got caught in the crossfire. Or, like in 1866, when they found each other again in Vienna, Simon Culp was hired to protect an archduke from a murder conspiracy. An heir of the archduke had hired an assassin to murder him. That assassin turned out to be Richard Swift. Once again, Many were entangled in the fighting shadows. The rivalry was personal, so much so that in 1882, a hired gun named Trimby Ludlow planned to kill Dickie Swift for an unrelated matter. When Simon Culp discovered this plot, he stopped it himself. No one was to interfere in their rivalry. Later, around 1941 in London, while Swift was handling some supernatural threats, Simon Culp ambushed him. The rivalry of shadows seemed to be at the tipping point. Perhaps the rivalry would be settled finally for once. In a sick twist of fate, a bomb landed exactly where they were standing, and the result was not a draw of both men's passing. Shockingly enough, Richard Swift, the Shade, absorbed his rival Simon Culp. This created a confusing and contradicting series of choices and actions by the Shade in the following years. At times, he was a villain of the loony kind. In others, he was a vile, capable, and evil supervillain. Clearly, the rivals struggled against each other for control. Chapter 63: Frankenstein's Monster. Frankenstein's monster was created by Dr. Frankenstein using stolen body parts and the blood of the alien king, Mr. Melmoth. After being released, the monster made his life mission to combat the evildoers of the supernatural kind. Around the year 1870, this mission led the monster to face Mr. Melmoth and his followers, the Circus of Maggots. The fight was fierce. The monster was outnumbered, but not undeterred. Mr. Melmoth was neutralized and his schemes stopped. Unfortunately, Frankenstein's monster was lost for decades as a result of the battle against Melmoth and his Circus of Maggots. Chapter 64: The Birth of an Icon. In 1839, an alien starliner malfunctioned and exploded, and a Jettison lifepod crashed in the middle of a cotton field in the American South. The pod automatically altered the appearance of its passenger named Arnus to mimic the first sentient lifeform who discovered him. That lifeform was a slave woman named Miriam, who saw the pod crash on land. And so it happened that Miriam found inside the pod a baby boy with her mother's eyes. After crashing in the Deep South, Arnus got to live and experience firsthand the horrors of slavery and the many other unfortunate hard times people of color went through in the Deep South of the United States of America. Chapter 65: The Wild West. Jack Woods was born and raised in Texas. He spent his youth as a roving cowboy adventurer and ranch hand before joining the Texas Rangers, where he enforced the law by fighting all sorts of bandits and outlaws. At some point in the early 19th century, Bartholomew Lash was born, raised to be a well-spoken and intelligent individual, but also appreciative of a solid effort of a good day's labor. Taking cues from both of them, Bart grew into the sort of unconventional individual neither parent could have predicted. Better known as Bat Lass, he became infamous for being a gambler, cheater, and ladies' man in the American Old West. He usually got into trouble because of one or more of those traits. A gang of criminals broke into a bank and assaulted the tellers. One of the bank clerks, Lazarus Lane, failed to act against the thieves, and as a result, the criminals mercilessly gunned down one of the other clerks. Stricken by guilt for his own inaction, Lazarus sought to avenge his fallen friend by confronting the bank robbers. They easily outnumbered him and tossed him into a shallow stream. Sometime after they had left him, a bolt of lightning crackled from the sky, striking Lazarus in the chest. Lane slumped over, lapsing into a coma. His trusted friend, Wise Owl, an Apache Native American, discovered Lane's body and brought him back to his hacienda. He placed him in front of the fireplace and kept a close vigil over him for 2 days and nights. There was no ready explanation for why Lane was still alive, but Wise Owl continued to care for him, administering aid in the form of strange roots and powders. 3 nights later, Lazarus, like his namesake, seemingly rose from the dead. It was later revealed that Wise Owl had used magic to turn Lane into a host for a spirit of vengeance. But Lane did not know this at the time. Grabbing hold of his new lease on life, Lazarus decided to become a dark-driven avenger of the night. Dedicated towards righting wrongs, he adopted the name and guise of El Diablo. In the 1840s, Brian Savage was stolen from his parents by Kiowa Indians, who named him Kiwo no Te, he who is less than human. Later, he was given the name Scalp Hunter by non-Native Americans he encountered. Brian discovered his true parentage after a lawman recognized a birthmark that marked him as a member of the Savage family and brought him to see his father, Matt Savage. Brian angrily rejected Matt, who died shortly after from tuberculosis, but repented of his anger and sang a Kiowa funeral dirge at his father's funeral. He kept his father's gold pocket watch as a memento. Scalp Hunter became more of a gunfighter as he grew older, but never lost touch with the Kiowa traditions that were part of him. John Tane was the son of a sheriff and a school teacher living in the Mormon settlement of Mesa City, Arizona. While growing up in Mesa City, Johnny's mother made him promise to never use guns and to instead follow in her footsteps. Johnny became a school teacher, but he soon found himself in a situation where violence was required. In order to keep his vow, Johnny created the identity of Johnny Thunder by changing clothes and darkening his hair to black. Throughout his career as Johnny Thunder, he rode a white stallion named Black Lightning. Born a few years before the First World War, Roger Parsons was the son of inventor Paul Parsons, who had developed a new type of non-flammable balloon gas and a secret balloon maneuvering device for observation and transportation. To test his formula and publicize the invention, Parsons brought along his wife Gloria and infant son Roger on a cross-country balloon trip from Long Island to the West Coast. Out in a sparsely populated part of the American West, a greedy competitor, Brand Braddock, sent riflemen to shoot down the test balloon. In the resulting crash, Mr. and Mrs. Parsons were killed, while the baby miraculously survived. The child was found and rescued from a cougar by a gold prospector called Nugget Ned, who raised the boy as his own. Ned taught him to fend for himself and trained him in archery, at which the boy excelled. Ned had much earlier found gold, lots of it, and no longer seemed to care about it anymore. He let young Roger use gold to make arrowheads, and because of this, his Indian friends called him Golden Arrow. William Bill Polk was the son of a sheep herder in the American Old West. During a time when sheep ranchers and cattlemen were fighting in an undeclared war over grazing rights. When Bill's father was murdered, everyone assumed the deed was done by the elder Polk's cattle ranching rival, Malon. But Bill discovered evidence that Malon was innocent and set out in search of the true killer, a man known only as Claggett. Bill's quest took him to a ranch in Texas where he honed his skills and joined a rodeo. When he grew bored with the rodeo circuit, he joined the army as a scout, then took up prospecting. When bandits bushwhacked him and stole his gold, he tracked them down and captured all three. Bill turned the bandits and was offered a job as a deputy sheriff. He declined, stating that he preferred to travel, but not revealing his search for Claggett. When Bill traveled acting as a freelance deputy to sheriffs all over the West. He apparently did not give his real name. People soon began calling Bill the Wyoming Kid. Ohayesa Powwow Smith was the Sioux sheriff of the town of Elkhorn. He left his home in Red Deer Valley to learn more about the white man's world. His tracking and expert gun skills won him employment as a deputy sheriff and eventually the job of sheriff of Elkhorn. Once he became sheriff, Powwow spent most of his time in the town of Elkhorn, only rarely returning to Red Deer Valley. He preferred to be addressed by his given name, Ohayesa, but the white citizenry took to calling him Powwow so stubbornly that he eventually gave up and accepted the nickname among them. Ohayesa later married to his fellow Sioux tribe-mate Fleetfoot, and his peacekeeping exploits earned him honorary U.S. citizenship. Despite his sterling record in law enforcement, Ohayesa is still racially shunned by white society. Rather than react to this, Ohayesa let his deeds speak for himself. Rodney Gaynor, born Rodrigo Gaynor, was a polo player and wealthy playboy from the eastern United States who was half Mexican, with a mother born in Guadalajara. Growing bored with his lifestyle, he turned to traveling across the country, in which he visited Seguro, a small town in New Mexico. There, he was appalled by the living conditions of the poor farmers and the callousness of the landlords, and looked for a way to fight this injustice. Rodney met Marisa Dillon, Seguro's local investigative reporter, who also had Rodney's sense of justice, and through her, he learned from the local priest about the legend of Don Fernando Suarez, who fought the corrupted Mexican land barons of the 1840s under the identity of El Castigo, or the Whip in English. Inspired by El Castigo's adventures, Rodney decided to become the new Whip, as he fought for the rights of the common man and, in time, began defending more of the American Southwest. Jonah Hex was born on November 1st, 1838, in northwest Missouri to Woodson and Virginia Hex. He and his mother often suffered physical abuse from his alcoholic father. Jonah eventually became a cavalry scout in the United States Army. When the Civil War broke out in 1861, Jonah, feeling that the South was justified in seeking independence, joined the Confederate States Army and earned a commission as a lieutenant in the 4th Cavalry. As time passed, Jonah Hex felt conflicted. He had bonded with his fellow Confederates, but did not want to fight for slavery, given his own history as a slave. After being tricked and accused of treason, Hex was forced to desert the Confederate Army to become a bounty hunter. A group of hired guns attack a family searching for something. In the end, the daughter, Catherine, is kidnapped. A small box with a bat symbol on it is taken, and the mother is left to cradle the body of her dead son as a strange black ranger looks on silently. This ranger was a time-displaced Bruce Wayne, who faced the gunslingers of the era like Jonah Hex and Midnight Horse when trying to rescue Catherine from the bandits that kidnapped her. In the 19th century, when Metropolis was just a small frontier town, Marilyn was a waitress in Bebo's saloon. One day, an outlaw named Terraman came to town and terrorized Metropolis with advanced futuristic weapons. He was eventually defeated by two mysterious strangers, a man who could fly and a black woman on a glowing horse. Marilyn was inspired by the woman, unaware that she was in fact herself from the future. She went on to adopt the guise of Marilyn Moonlight, a Wild West hero known as the Spirit of Metropolis. In the waning later days of the Old West, a couple made their marks as masked vigilante gunslingers who fought crime in the American West during the 19th century. Kate Manser was a legendary hero and bounty hunter better known as Cinnamon, for her luscious red hair. Her partner was Hannibal Hawks, better known as Nighthawk. They traveled through land, delivering justice and hunting outlaws. They were the reincarnated forms of Egyptian royalty prince Khufu and Princess Shayera. Their spirits would continue through the ages as doomed lovers, eventually becoming Hawkman and Hawkgirl. In a turn of events, decided maybe by fate, Hannibal killed a highway outlaw named Jim Craddock. Due to the strange nature of his death, Jim returned from the dead as the Gentleman Ghost. However, Craddock is unable to rest until his executioner dies and his soul enters the afterlife. But the problem is that Nighthawk is the reincarnation of Khufu, who is cursed to be resurrected along with his true love throughout time. Alright folks, I think this is a good stopping point as any. Technically, the script for this video is about 11 pages and I only just finished page 5. And we are already 30 minutes into this episode, so I'm gonna cut it here. We did cover a lot of ground. Technically, we started in the pre-American Revolutionary era with Ferro, the Carib pirate. Then we went into some of the events and the characters that spawned during the American Revolutionary War. Then we went from that to the time in history where the colonies started to expand into the West, with a lot of characters that DC published right before the golden age of superheroes, like your original Johnny Thunder, El Castigo aka the Whip, Cinnamon, your Jonah Hexes, the retroactive inclusion of Bruce Wayne in the Wild West era, and so forth and so on. I do want to emphasize that as the series progresses, there's going to be a lot more information available for me to dissect and provide for you guys, because a lot of the characters that we talked about before, specifically like the Earthbound characters, don't have that much history to them because a lot of those characters were one-offs or they got lost in history. All the publishers that went out of business, got bought out, went bankrupt, right? Even though those got absorbed into what later became DC Comics, I guess DC discontinued the publication of those characters or those stories or the line of comic book series that had those characters in them. So once we start reaching like your golden era characters, like the members of the Justice Society and all of those street tier pulp type of heroes, there will be more information because those heroes did stood the test of time. They have stuck around this long, so they have many origins being retold in different eras in many ways. And Waid and Wilgus, they had to figure out and pick and choose how to include them in the new history of the DC universe. So in the future, you will see me referencing the citations provided by Waid and Wilgus, but whenever I do see something that fits in a little better, whether it's the visuals or the actual origin story, I will chime in and add that myself. But with that being said, make sure you stick around for those citations so you can see the comic books that all this information has been taken out of, and you can read them for yourself if you would like to do so. Once again, my name is Jancy, aka Year the Collector. Thank you for watching. You have a blessed day, and remember to read more comics.